In this lecture, we're going to cover the reading that talked about parasocial relationships. And I know the reading was maybe a little bit dense, but we're going to try to unpack that a little bit and simplify it. So what most literature is talking about when it talks about parasocial relationships is a one-sided, sort of in the mind of the viewer or in the mind of the consumer, with either a personality or individual that they see in the media or maybe see at the arena when they go to games, but some sort of celebrity level status individual that the relationship is really about them adoring or being a really big fan of this celebrity. And in some cases, it isn't actually even the real person, it's the character that they play. So the reading talked a lot about Horcruxes in the Harry Potter world. So I threw on this slide the example of Hermione Granger. So not actually the actress that plays Hermione, but the character Hermione. And the other examples on the slide are either from celebrity culture or the sports world. And the main sort of driving factor in this is that the fan follows the person or the character so closely and is so sort of emotionally invested in their successes that they feel like they know them, whether they even exist or not. They feel like they know the celebrity or know the athlete or know the character so well that they feel like there's a relationship there. The reading argues that this is an extension of identity, and so it's moving us beyond sort of our immediate realm, or our immediate self, I should say, and into partially others. So we feel good when they do well, we feel bad when they don't do well, we cheer on their careers. In some way, we might think of this as having similar sort of relationship to a parent and a child, where a parent feels the successes and feels the joy when the child succeeds, and feels the hurt and feels the pain when the child fails, or if the child somehow sort of stumbles along the way. The big difference, of course, with a parent-child relationship versus a parasocial relationship is the actual physical connection and caring for, and the two-way connection that a parent and child has versus the one-sided relationship of the parasocial relationship. And so the reading actually extends the idea of a parasocial relationship to an entire sports team rather than just an individual. Most literature in the mass media scholarship focuses on parasocial relationships with individual celebrities. Sometimes it's local news anchors or reporters. Sometimes it's Hollywood celebrities. Sometimes it's professional athletes. But this reading actually takes it a step further and says we have a relationship or a quasi-relationship with entire sports teams. What the author is really saying here is that being a sports fan is defined first and foremost by the ability to make all of this up in our head, and that there's no real connection here. It's not a two-way loving relationship. If we treated a real person the way we treat our sports teams, would most likely need a restraining order for it would be basically stalking or sort of the constant following that isn't reciprocated. So it isn't sort of the two-way relationship that we would normally think of in an interpersonal relationship. It's very much a one-sided, the fan cheering, adoring, loving, and then the team is just sort of doing its own thing, not necessarily even knowing that the fan exists. So I'd like you to take a moment or two, and we'll have another discussion item number 3 on your list. Again, complete all of the discussion items before submitting your discussion post. But this one has 2 parts again, focuses on this idea that it's all in the fan's head. So as probable sports fans, which I'm guessing most of you are, how do you respond to that notion that the entire fandom relies on the ability to make it all up in your head, to the ability to make up this one-sided relationship, that you deeply care about a team who, for the most part, doesn't really know you exist, at least not as an individual. Obviously, teams know that fan bases exist, but they don't know individual fans. How do you feel about that? And then second, is your love for your favorite team real? Or is it an imaginary relationship? So take a minute or two, pause the lecture, hop over to your discussion post, complete the discussion, and then come on back. So the author starts to get into kind of the Horcrux conversation when the reading talks about sort of extensions of identity. and focusing on kind of actions define identity. So we have an outward focusing in identity, if you want to think about it in terms of our earlier lecture on sort of identifying what it is to be a fan. Here would be the actions and things around us define the self, define the identity. This is generally speaking, this is a more positive view of parasocial relationships called the social prosthetic system, where the things around us that we care about a lot are extensions of our own identity, are extensions of ourself. And this again is where the author gets into discussion of Horcruxes and Lord Voldemort. This is probably a little more positive spin on that, of seeing sort of spreading ourselves through other things. So sometimes people, family members, close friends, and that our identity is sort of extended when we have those relationships. The author's arguing that the same thing happens when we are sort of deeply involved with a team or with an athlete, that we can kind of continue our identity into them, so that we, like I said earlier, we see a boost in self-esteem when the team wins or when the player does well, or sort of despair, sadness when the team fails or when the team comes up short. And research has shown this relatively consistently, that the teams that we cheer for, when they win, we feel better about ourselves, we feel more attractive, we feel more intelligent, and when the teams we're cheering for lose, we feel just the opposite. We feel worse about ourselves, so we get a self-esteem ding. We feel less attractive, less intelligent, less capable, sort of less effective. So all the sorts of identity-related elements, as if we ourselves failed, get extended in this sort of prosthetic system when cheering for a team. So in many ways, a lot of the research supports what the author is arguing here. And I find that really interesting, that if sports teams are kind of an extension of ourselves, and we sort of feel deeply the impact of their wins or losses, why wouldn't we just cheer for the winners? That's our last slide of this lecture, and it's a discussion item that I'd like you to put into your discussion post. If we can accept that sports fandom can serve as this sort of social prosthetic system, boosting our self-esteem with wins, making us feel better about our intelligence, our capabilities, our attractiveness, why wouldn't we simply pick the winning teams and root for them? So I grew up cheering for the Hawkeyes. Iowa Hawkeyes are generally okay at a lot of sports, but not really great at most sports. Wouldn't it have been better if I just simply started cheering for the Alabama Crimson Tide football team, the Duke basketball team, or North Carolina basketball team, whichever team you'd want in the professional leagues? It could actually even rotate on who's doing really well that season. So last year I would have been a Philadelphia Eagles fan, perhaps, or you could almost, in the last decade, always have been a Patriots fan and felt really good about yourself. So why don't we just cheer for the winners? If we accept that we get a sort of a boost in self-esteem and we feel better about ourselves in general, why not simply pick the winners? What is it about this perspective? What are they overlooking in terms of favorite teams, loyalty, suffering through the bad years? Have a little bit of a discussion about that, on why we can't just pick the winners each season and cheer for the winners. And this is the last slide. So this is, once you get done with your discussion post for this, you're good to go on this lecture.